Hi, my name is Jarek Ogiegło, and I'm a software developer at Northmill. And today I'd like to talk about productivity from the perspective of a software developer, putting an extra focus on the tools we can use to improve that productivity. And what I'll talk about today is what productivity even is. And then I'll proceed to describing some tools that can help us with it, like Vim, Terminal, and some programmatic ligatures. First of all, I'd like to define and maybe quantify productivity. In its simplest definition, we can say that productivity is just the output of our work over the input we've provided. That sounds really simple, but the problems start when we want to measure those factors. Do we use salary, hours, or frustrations of software developers that are working on a project? Either way, it's pretty difficult to measure, and it becomes even more difficult when we want to measure the output. There are a couple of aspects that we can use to quantify it, like lines of code, forward movement, meaning how fast tasks are proceeding on the board, or maybe some more arbitrary measures like function points, features implemented, deployments, or documentation produced. But my crazy idea is that however we measure, if we manage to make the input easier, to make it go smoother, the quality of the output should also increase. When I was looking for some scientific work about the factors that influence the software developers' productivity, I couldn't find much that was interesting, but one work caught my eye. It's the systematic review of productivity factors in software development. And those researchers chose a pretty interesting approach because they went through scientific work on that topic and just summarized the factors that were described and how many times those factors appeared. The first interesting thing about it is that they divided those factors into soft and technical ones. And this is the first kind of interesting discovery that you can influence the productivity using those soft factors like respect within the team, increasing the team identity, or using something called E factor, which is uninterrupted hours of work. But what's more interesting for us developers are probably the technical factors. And you can measure them by, for example, using the precedentedness, which is how similar the current project is to stuff that we've been doing previously. Also, we can improve the productivity by turning the knobs of the required reliability. Also, kind of related to the previous one is the completeness of the design. We can be more productive, turn things in faster if the design doesn't have to be that complete at the beginning. And what's most important from the point of view of this presentation is the use of software tools that can help us a lot. And as you can see, this particular factor appeared a lot comparing to the other ones. So the first tool I'd like to describe has to do with the debate between keyboard versus mouse. And there is a very interesting blog post by Steve Yeager, which deals mostly with the economy of motion. And he notices there that we should strive to be like musicians that are trying to become virtuosos. And for the virtuoso, the economy of motion is one of the most important things. He also highlights the fact that mouse in general is a pretty clumsy instrument. But if we are to ditch the mouse, then how would we navigate and edit our documents? And that's where Vim comes in. Vim is I would say, an editor, but it is an kind of approach to working with the text editor. It's often confused with VI, but it is in fact its successor. Vim simply means VI improved, and as you can see here, it has just more features. There's a funny picture that shows the differences between different text editing tools. It's not that precise. I wouldn't necessarily agree with the part for VI. Working with VI resembles more what we are shown here with Pico, because it requires some effort to learn, but you can become much more effective than with other IDEs. And now I'd like to show you how to work with Vim. And I will be using Vim's emulation in IDE I'm currently using, which is Rider. But this kind of emulation is available for pretty much all popular IDEs. So the first problem that comes to my mind that came to my mind when I was first encountering Vim is, if I'm supposed to not use the keyboard, the mouse, how would I navigate through the document? And that's why Vim has actually 3 different modes of operation. There's the normal mode, visual mode, and insert mode. There's also an additional one that's called command mode, but it's special, and you'll see in a moment why. So every time I press escape, and to make this presentation make more sense, you should see what I'm pressing, and it should display in the bottom left corner of the screen. So this character is actually escape. So each time you press escape in Vim, you're transported into normal mode. And normal mode is for navigating through the document and for manipulating the text. So you would assume that you'll navigate through the document with the arrow keys, but that's not actually how it works in Vim. In Vim, in order to move left, you press H. In order to move down, you press J. In order to go up, you press K, and L is for right. And they've arranged it like this because these keys are right next to each other, and they're also closer to the rest of the function keys. But that's not the only way you can navigate through the document. In Vim, there is this concept of a word, and if I press W, I'm transported to the next word, as you can see right now. If I want to go back a word, I press B. And there is actually a distinction between the capital letter word and the small letter word. Capital letter word includes more special characters. If I press capital W, I'm moved farther. It's best exemplified by navigating through this line. If I press small w when I'm here, I'm transported into this this bracket. When I press capital letter W, I'm transported into to the dot. That's because capital letter word consists also of these bracket characters and all of the additional stuff here. And it's the same thing for capital letter W. You can also navigate through the document by moving through paragraphs. And you do it by using the curly braces. And a paragraph is just a part of text that's delimited with an empty line. So also, it's worth noting that each time you encounter any kind of concept that's maybe not specific but requires some explanation in Vim, you can go to the command mode that I've described earlier, that I've mentioned earlier, and you can just type help and the concept you want to explain, paragraph. And what's happened now is that my browser was opened, and I was transported to Vim's documentation, where this particular concept is explained. As you can see here, it's just a part of text that's delimited with an empty line. There's also a way to transport within the file by pressing the, and I think that the casting has stopped. So you can also go pretty much to the bottom and the start of the file by pressing those double square brackets. And the way this works, and it's actually a kind of a remnant of the past, because that's a way of navigating between functions in C. And functions in C are constructed in such a way that they have curly braces in the first column. And that's what this command uses. It goes to the next curly brace in the first column. So you can use it, for example, if you're working with C# to navigate to the beginning of the namespace or to the end of the namespace. But there's also more usable stuff, like you can go to the last character in the line, which we're doing by pressing the $sign. You can go to the first character of the line, which we do by pressing the caret. You can also go to the absolute beginning of the file of the line by pressing 0. We can also navigate through occurrences of the word under the cursor. And for example, an easy example here would be, we've got a collection of catalog items here, and they all have a property called name. So if I go over that word and I press, let's use this one, and I press star, I'll go to the next occurrence of it, and it will be highlighted. So cycling through those through star, and if I want to go back, I need to use the hash sign. So these are the basics of navigating through the file, but we can also manipulate the content of the file. And let's take deleting of parts of text as our first example. To do that, I press D, and I have to combine it with some kind of a specifier what I want to delete. And the simplest way is I could type D, and in normal mode, to move one character right, I press L, right? So it just moves me to the right. So if I press D and L, I'll remove a single character to the right. And that's how combining commands in Vim works. So as you remember, to move to the next word, I press W, right? So if I go to the beginning of this line and press D, W, I'll remove a single word. But I can also specify how many words I want to remove. So I can press D, 2, W, and it removes 2 words. It also works with other navigation specifiers. As you remember, the $sign means transporting to the end of the line. So let's say, let's start here, and let's press D $sign. So it removed the part of line from where I was to the end of the file. And it will work the same way with beginning of the file. There's also a fast way to remove the entire line. You just press DD. It removes the entire line. There's also a pretty useful thing when you want to remove stuff. You can, what you can do is you can use search for that. And we can do it by pressing D and some search phrase like db context. Oh, it didn't work. I don't know. Why would that be? Let's try through command mode. D E context. Yeah. So it works only in a single line. So it would make more sense if I had more of these phrases in the same line. But we can also work globally. So if I use such a command like global db context, I've made a mistake. Context. It removes each line that has the specified phrase in it. So it removed all of the lines that had db context in it. I can also do the inverse of that. I can just add an exclamation mark, db context, and the D. And what it will do, it will remove all of the lines apart from those that have the searched phrase. And I know that some of these examples are pretty contrived, but they should show you how easy it is to combine commands in Vim. And what actually happens if you use the D command is that the parts of text that you're seemingly removing, like for example, what I'll do right now with DW, I've removed the DB options, right? But there's a concept called registers in Vim, and you can preview them when using the reg command. And as you can see here, the DB options that I seemingly removed landed in the unnamed register. And we can specify the registers that we want to put stuff in. And you do that by using the quotation mark. So how would I do that is I would, for example, go here, press D, and specify the register I want to put this next word into. So let's specify U. So I'll press quotation mark, U, and press W. It didn't work. Okay. Okay, so let's see if it's now in the U register. Yeah, DB context expression builder. That's exactly what I've copied there, and I've just mixed up the sequence. You first need to specify the register, so quotation mark U, and then DW. That's how it works. And now, when I know I've put this part of text in the U register, I can specify that register again, U, and just use that text from there that I have there. And you put the text from a register by simply pressing P. So first I press quotation mark U, I specify the U register, and then I press P to use the content of the register. Another pretty useful thing is that the fact that you can do block inserts with Vim. So the way you do it is you go to the visual mode with control. That's control V. You specify the column that you will want to put text in. You press Shift I and then start typing. And this text appears only in the first line, but if I press Escape, it will be also put in the column, in all of the lines that I've specified within the column. And that's actually making use of the visual mode that I haven't described yet. But when you're using a mouse, you can highlight parts of the text. And that's also something you can do with the keyboard in Vim. You just press V, and now we are in visual mode. So every we go to now will be part of the selection. And actually, it's in Vim, it's considered kind of like a cheating because it simulates using the mouse, but from time to time it proves to be very useful. But another really useful thing is that the way Vim handles substitutions and replacing parts of code. So let's say we want to in this line we want to replace all of the occurrences of the word controller, and you do that through the command mode. You type S and what you want to substitute. We want to substitute controller, and the IDE helps us here by highlighting the text that will be substituted. Let's put something, I don't know, maybe a series of T. And what it did is it actually works with the first occurrence of this character. We can also work globally. So if we put percentage sign before the substitution operation, it will work on the entire file. So controller, and now what happened here? Yeah, all occurrences of the. I don't know why it doesn't work. Didn't want to replace the controller here. I have no idea. Okay, so that's definitely something worth investigating. But you see that all of the other occurrences of controller were in fact replaced. So another useful thing is that, for example, I may want to change the controller, but only at the beginning of this file. So I can specify the lines I want to operate in. So let's say, let's specify that I want to do it from line 20, from line 18 to line 22, and I want to replace controller with like this. It only changed the controller in those lines from line 18 to 22. So we can limit the substitution that way. There is also a pretty useful feature that allows me to substitute with confirmation. So I can do %s and then now type in controller, substitute it with something crazy. So what it does right now, it highlights what I will be replacing, and it asked me if I want to replace this one. This one I want to replace, this also, but this I don't want to replace. And you can go through all of the occurrences of the specified word and replace it like that. Something that I'm using pretty often are also bookmarks, and Vim makes it really easy working with bookmarks. To specify a bookmark, you press M and the bookmark specifier. Oh, and I can see that you don't see what I'm typing. So I place cursor somewhere and I press, for example, MA. What it did right now is it created a bookmark. So in order to be transported to that bookmark, I press apostrophe A. And I went to the bookmark. And another way that we can compose commands is, for example, I can specify a bookmark here, MA, and another one here, MB. And if I go to the visual mode, combine it with moving between bookmarks, I can select the part between bookmarks. So if I press V, going through the visual mode, and B, it highlights the part of text between those two bookmarks. And if you want to work with Vim, it's really worth investigating the Vim RC file. So in my case, it's called IDEA Vim RC because I'm using the emulation, but the rules governing it are the same for all other configuration files. And it allows to configure the entire Vim functionality through this file. What's the most important thing is, as you can see here, this map and no remap lines, they allow us to define some shortcuts. And what's the difference between them? So map is the simpler one, and what it does, it defines kind of a mapping, but it will try to execute commands hidden by those individual characters. No remap treats each individual character as just this character, so it won't try to execute any commands hidden by those characters. And as you can see here, there is an N character before the no remap. And you can also specify that a particular mapping is for a particular mode. So N stands for normal. If I wanted to use this mapping for the visual mode, I would put V here. If something like this one in line 31 doesn't have a mode specifier, then it works in all modes. Now, also another very interesting thing is that Vim is so popular that it also has its plugins simulating it in browsers. So I can use the Vimium plugin for Chrome, and if I press F, it highlights everything that's a link, and I can press it by only using the keyboard. So it can be more efficient that way. So what's the really important here is to highlight that you can use Vim emulation with pretty much every IDE that's out there. I've been using it with Rider, with VS Code, with Visual Studio, and even Chrome, like I showed you just a moment ago. But another really useful tool for the developers that I wanted to talk about is the terminal. And before we start talking about it, it's pretty important to disambiguate some terms, because there are people who use terminal, console, and shell as the same, but they are not. And this is the kind of a funny explanation of those terms that I found on Stack Overflow. It says that the terminal is something at the end of an electric wire, a shell is a home of a turtle, and the console is a kind of a cabinet. And it might be funny, but it's also closer to the truth that I initially thought. Because actually, the terminal is something at the end of a wire. It's the thing at the end of a communications process. So in the early days of computers, it was the way to communicate with the actual computer. And the console, like the funny definition said, in the early days was just a piece of furniture that housed the terminal. And nowadays in software, console and terminal can actually be used interchangeably. But the shell is the program that processes the input and provides us with the output. I will be talking mostly about Linux tools for the terminal, but there is something called Windows Subsystem for Linux, and it's the way you can use Linux on Windows. But you can be wary of some of the tutorials, because some of them show how to use those tools with Cygwin, which is something entirely different. There's been release of a new version of WSL, which is a big improvement over the first one. And you can see the summary of the features here. It looks really, really good for WSL2, but there is a caveat, the performance across OS file systems. And it can be a breaking thing for a lot of us, especially, but in particular, when you're working between file systems. So here's the diagram of WSL. And if you look closely, you can see that the interoperability between file systems is handled through something called 9P protocol. And 9P protocol is nothing different than a file share protocol through the network, which works really, really slowly, and makes working with WSL really hard if you're working between the file systems. But this is a screen taken on Windows, and it shows you that you can use all of the plugins, all of the features that I will be showing shortly. But what's the easiest way to benefit from working with a terminal is just using aliases. And that's using an alias in Linux is pretty easy, but it's harder to define in Windows, and it can't be done in a straightforward way. But if you're using PowerShell, you can do it like that. You just define a function and use set alias to define an alias. But to be productive, you can obviously also work with a raw bash, but it's much nicer to work with ZSH, which is an alternative and I would say an expansion over bash. It offers plugins and themes and other functionalities that some of them are listed here. They may be pretty cryptic if you want to delve into them to know the descriptions. Here's a good explanation. And let's see what we have in a typical terminal. So right now I've disabled all of the fancy features. I just have a clean bash. So if I want to go to a folder, I need to cd into it, for example, like this. But there's also something called auto cd, and I should be able to use it. I should just be able to input the name of the folder I want to go to and be transferred into it. But it doesn't work in bash. Let's say I want to kill a process. In order to do that, I would need to find the process ID for it. But I would want to just specify the command and press tab in order to get a list of current processes. But I can't do that in bash. It doesn't have this feature. I would like to interactively search through the file system. And it also, bash also can't do that easily. I bet there probably is a way, but it's not straightforward. I would also like to use the smart history of commands I've used. So for example, I know I've used an ls command to some folder some time ago, but I don't remember the full path. So I'd like to press ls and arrow keys to switch to get back to it. But if I press the arrow keys, it's just using all of my previous commands. It's not filtering. That's not good. I'd also like to have syntax highlighting. So if I make a mistake, I know immediately, but there is no syntax highlighting in bash. I'd also like to specify some actions that terminal makes for me after I do something in terminal, and that's called hooks. And bash doesn't offer that kind of functionality, and there are no cool themes for it. So the way I would switch to ZSH, so installation process is fairly easy. I won't show that, but switching through to different terminals is made. with a ch command, but to use it, you have to remember your password, which I just made a mistake in. And it specifies the shell I'm currently using. I can switch to ZSH like this, and KeyCluster just activated itself. If I can switch it through this file. Oh, so there's another benefit of knowing Vim. You now know how to exit it. So I'll need to restart my terminal to make the changes go into effect. And you can see here that there was a glimpse of one of the themes I'll be showing. But now we're using clean ZSH. And that's what we have right now. So let's try to see if ZSH uses the auto jump functionality. So I've got a Postman folder here. I type it, I'm in Postman folder right now. So the way it works, it's just you type in a command and it tries to execute it. If it doesn't work, then it checks if there's a folder with the name of the command we've just input in our current location. If there is a folder, then it CDs into that folder. So great, auto CD works. There's the next thing I wanted to do previously is to kill a process, and I wanted to do it by specifying the process ID. With ZSH, if I press kill and tab, I'm presented with a list of processes that I can browse and easily specify the process to kill. So it works really well. And there is a really cool plugin for ZSH that's called Fuzzy Search. And what it enables is the really rich searching features. So I've got it installed and configured in ZSH RC, which is the center for everything ZSH, and you can configure everything here. But the installation process is pretty simple. You just follow the commands that are in the manual, and then you just need to add a few simple lines to your ZSH RC file. Here's the line that's required to make it work. And how it works is when I press Ctrl R, I'm searching through my command history. And if I press LS, the list is instantly filtered, and it presents me with the list of commands with ls that I've put in recently. It also has on its own the smart filtering. Oh, it doesn't. Yeah. Okay. So my ZSH does that, and I'll be showing it to you in a moment. But Fuzzy Search does also something different things that are pretty cool. It allows us to so searching through the commands is with Control R, and if I press Control T, I'll be searching through the file system, and it's also very useful. But for example, I know that I will want to edit something in Vim, and I know that something is, I don't know, in the Postman folder, or maybe in the AutoJump folder. What I do is I specify the path, and then I put two asterisk signs, and now I can go through the content of the AutoJump folder and specify which file I want to edit with Vim. Very useful. So smart history, like I've shown you, still doesn't work. There's a fuzzy search history that we can use. Syntax highlighting still doesn't work. And there's, I can tell you that hooks also don't work, and there are no cool themes for ZSH. There are themes, but not as cool as what's available with Oh My ZSH. What's my Oh My ZSH? It's just an extended version of ZSH. It's a framework built on top of ZSH. And it allows even more plugins, richer plugins, even more themes, and has an easy to use configuration. It's so influential that even Windows tools try to emulate these features, and there is something called Oh My Posh for PowerShell that allows to achieve some of the features I'll be presenting. So the way I will activate Oh My ZSH is I have to go to this control center for ZSH, which is ZSHRC. And there is this line, this one. I'll just have to uncomment it. If you would be installing Oh My ZSH for the first time, we'll just have to introduce it into the ZSHRC file. Okay. So as you can see instantly, the prompt has changed. So let's see if we have some of those features that we were looking for. And yeah, smart command history works immediately. And obviously, all of the features that I've shown you earlier are still functional. So smart history is working right now. Let's see if we have syntax highlighting. Yep, it recognizes the vim command, and if I make a mistake, I'm instantly notified. And as you can see, it also expands the commands, so it knows what I was doing previously, and I can use this pretty fast. There's also a very useful plugin for this. If you're using AWS, for example, AWS has something called AWS CLI, and I am always forgetting some of the things you can use with some of the commands. So if you don't know what can be used with SQS, you just put tab, and you can choose from each kind of specifier. So it's very useful if you're using AWS. And there are similar plugins to other tools. You just need to browse through the plugins library and choose whatever suits you. And there's also something called hooks that I've been mentioning previously. And hooks, I have a hook defined here. It's nothing spectacular. What it does, this function, it just lists all of the files. It does a simple ls. And what it will do is it's specified as a pre-CMD hook. So before any command is executed, this function will also run. So I've changed the ZSHRC. Let's reload. You see that it's already working. So each time I do anything, it prints the list of the files. I've used it to show you what hooks are, but it can become cumbersome. So let's disable it. Load. And the last thing I wanted to show you in the terminal is a theme. There's a very popular theme that's called Power Level 10K. There's also its predecessor, Power Level 9K, but I see no point in using the previous version. And you see that my prompt instantly changed, and it offers a lot of features. You can plug in anything into this prompt. But there's a couple of interesting things. For example, you see that the way this prompt works is it's not displayed on each line. It's transient. It goes with the active line. And you can very easily configure this theme, tailor it to your liking. So if I type p10k configure, I'm transported into the wizard that's responsible for configuring it. It does some initial checks to verify if I have all of the required icons and fonts. And now it allows me to specify how I want my prompt to look. You see, it allows me to specify the hour format. If the prompt should be 1 line or 2 lines, if the connection should be solid. Yeah, you see what I'm getting at. So you can really tailor it to whatever you like. I don't want to change mine, but you can see that it also has some of the things that are not apparent instantly. It shows me, for example, if the previous command that I ran was successful or not, and how long it took. There are also cool things related to AWS, for example, for it. But that's I bet that's something you will look for if you'll get interested in this topic. So the last thing I wanted to mention is I admit is pretty superficial, which is programmatic ligatures. What is a ligature? It is a special character that combines more characters into one. So the theory is that it makes reading the code easier. It lessens the cognitive load. And there are those who agree with this theory. There are those who disagree. But I really prefer to work with code that uses programmatic ligatures. And there is some crazy stuff you can do with those, depending on the font you choose. There's also some of them have these features that apparently should make reading them easier and nicer. And that's an example of the ligature I'm working with. It's called Fira Code, and it has some nice touches like the ones I'm currently showing you. But there's a whole selection. These are just the most popular ones. So from the topics I've described, are all of the links that I've used as sources are listed here. I especially recommend the Steve Yegas article about mouse versus keyboard and the argument against programmatic ligatures, because reading it, the author tries to discourage using programmatic ligatures, but there are some arguments that really convinced me to start using them. Thank you.